Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge, episode 36. We've had production problems on the show before because I do it all by myself, but honest to God, I don't think this one was my problem. Everything was working just great. I got the levels, I had everything, but we did a couple without sound. Looks like we get sound now. So that's good. Sorry about that. Those of you who live on YouTube, and YouTube's probably a better place to be. No commercials and none of this nonsense. You just get the final version. But we had to restart it twice because for some reason or another, the genies of the USB connections or whatever didn't recognize the mic. But again, I have levels, and I've heard myself through my headsets both times. So my awesome producers, really it's what you are, honestly. I've got about, I don't know, right at the exact moment that we're speaking, I have 177 producers who are those of you watching the show live, and we get problems from the booth, and my booth is the comment stream here at Ustream. So thanks for that. Sorry about that. We're live and recording episode 36 of the Stratosphere Lounge. Sound is working, and this, of course, is the famous Haiku episode of the Stratosphere Lounge, and we decided to throw a pretty loose net with the Haiku because we wanted the vibe, not so much the precision, so I wasn't going to be a haiku Nazi about all this. So we got a bunch of really, really fun ones. And let me preface this show by saying the first three questions I took, I'm really embarrassed about. I'm embarrassed about them because about 45 minutes before the show, I was just walking the aisles talking to Jeremy about various things, and he told me about the debt ceiling being frozen. And I feel like a guy who does a Florida Gator football radio show, and I'm doing a call-in and somebody says, "Hey Bill, what was your favorite part of the national championship game?" And I'm like, we want a national championship? I didn't get that memo. This is, if not the biggest story out there, it's certainly one of the biggest ones in this outrage-orama, in this whatever. I just don't know what to say. Am I off the air? I'm getting such weird signals today from people. They're saying, well, we're off the air, pulled up. I'm really a little worried. I really am a little worried. I just am very concerned about this because I can't explain it. I've got good bandwidth. Everything's looking good here. And I don't know. I'm just going to go ahead and keep talking because this is very alarming. Our end is technically just fine. I really do. It's funny. It's really funny. I never ever thought I'd get to this point, but I'm at the point now where I'm beginning to think, is somebody dicking around with this? Pardon my language. I'm just going to assume that we don't. Anyway, I was unaware of the debt clock situation. Yeah. CP Tome says it's a rodeo clown. Yeah, you're looking at him. The freezing of the national debt, I didn't know about until 40 minutes ago. So we had three questions about that, so it's convenient that I happened to stumble upon this minor story. So you get to watch my outrage in real time, because normally when I hear these horrible things, I have at least a night or two to think them over before I kind of come out with what I want to say about them. But I just found out about this just now, so this should be interesting. So let's just go to the haikus from the Facebook page, where, of course, all of our questions for Stratosphere Lounge are done from the Facebook page. And thanks for being so good-natured about this, you awesome Ustream users who put up with this nonsense pretty much every week. So here are our first three questions. They're all similar, and they're all terrific in the form of haiku, or mock haikus, or mockus, as we like to say. Here's one from Dale Amadai, who writes, "National debt stuck. Yes, tell me another one. Party at Barry's." Jane Sinclair says, "Debt meter pegged. No worries. 18 holes." And John Miller says, "National debt frozen. Deficits keep climbing. Banana Republic." Yes, 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 and yes. I just don't know what to say about this. I just don't know what to say. I'll tell you what my first thoughts were. And look, I try to be a kind of an outpost of optimism. Catchy little phrase, an outpost of optimism. And I'll stay an outpost of optimism. But I have to tell you, my first response when I heard this, because all this has hit me at once, I knew that some kind of collapse, some kind of financial, let's just say, adjustment was coming, and I was hoping it would take the form of inflation. and then maybe quicker inflation, something that we would have some time to at least adjust to, prepare for. But when I heard this, my first thought was, no, one day we're going to wake up and it's going to be all over. We're just going to wake up one day and it's just nothing's going to work. The ATMs aren't going to work. Nothing's going to work. If I understand this correctly, we have a debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is the legal limit of how much money the United States government can borrow. And when we were about $25 million underneath the debt ceiling months ago, at that point, we're adding, $90 million a day, whatever the number is, in debt. It's higher than that. At the point where we surpass the debt ceiling, then the government simply cannot spend any more money. It is out of money and it's out of debt. Your credit card is maxed. If you have a $5,000 line on your credit card and you're at $5,000, you can't go and buy more stuff. Well, you can if you're the government. But that was the situation. Now, we've had to raise the debt ceiling so many times, it's hardly a ceiling, but we have to do it. It has to be passed through legislation. And Barack Obama doesn't want to face that. So like everything else he doesn't want to face, he simply ignores it. He ignores the law. He ignores debt ceilings, ignores all of it. And if it were just him, it would be a problem that could be solved. But honestly, when you think about it, the Treasury Department and everybody else is complicit in this. So what they've done is they haven't admitted that they've gone over the debt ceiling. And I said, so they just stopped reporting it. And as Jeremy pointed out, no, they didn't stop reporting it. They report it every day. They're required by law to report it every day. They've just reported the same number every day for 70 days now, or 90, or whatever it is. Not too long ago, I was opening a new bank account for a new venture that we're going to launch here in first week of September. It's part of the giant tease I've been putting on, and that's about enough tease for a little while. I'll maybe tease a little more later, but it's going to be big, assuming there's still an economy in a month. And I was sitting there at the desk at Wells Fargo opening this bank account for this business, and I looked down and it said FDIC insured up to $250,000 backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. Now that line has been a joke for quite a while, but today was the first time I realized it's not just a joke in terms of an opinion. We're now past the amount of money that the government has. They can't borrow anymore. If somebody called that in now, technically speaking, we're out of money and we've reached the debt ceiling. We've gone through the debt ceiling. So everything that the government spends from this point forward is illegal, which means that they literally can print as much money as they want to, and they don't even have to account it anymore. This is the point that really, 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 really scares me. They don't have to account for it anymore. Used to be that they could go deeper and deeper and deeper into debt and just bald-faced wear the debt. But now, one entire branch of the government, the Treasury Department, is just simply decided, we'll play along, Messiah. We'll play along. If you say you don't want to have another debt argument, if you don't want to go to the American people and face the Republicans and raise the debt ceiling, if that's inconvenient for you, my liege, then we'll simply stop reporting it. We'll just stop reporting it. And honest to God, that bothers me more than the country being bankrupt. It bothers me more than the fact that we're out of money and out of our children's money and grandchildren's money and Chinese money. It bothers me more that we could just be, that entire branches of the government could just bend a knee and just say, well, if the president doesn't want us to report these embarrassing numbers, then what's accounting? What's accounting to that? What's the idea? What's law? What does law mean when compared to inconveniencing the God King? What does it mean? What does it mean? If it's inconvenient for the Lord to go before the peasants and explain why he's raising the debt ceiling one more time, him raising the debt ceiling one more time would be appalling and catastrophic. But the fact that he doesn't even have to anymore says it's what is left, folks. What's left? It's the law that they have to stop spending if they break this number. And they broke the number. So what happens? Nothing. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Nothing. They just stop reporting it. So imagine if you were to go down and you had a $5,000 credit card and you were at your $5,000 limit, and they swiped the card and basically the line came back dead. Has it been approved? No. Has it been denied? No. Might as well just back it up and take it with you then. Thank you. See, I'm holding the card. I have the physical card with me. Yeah, but how much is on the account? That doesn't really matter anymore. You see, it doesn't really matter what's on the card anymore. It doesn't really matter what the actual account limit is because there is no limit anymore. As long as you have the card, that's the main thing. I'm literally, and I think this is part of the plan. You just get so out of outrage. I was outraged about the osprey taking the dog to Martha's Vineyard. That's what they want. They want me to be outraged about things like putting a dog on an osprey, because it distracts me from the fact that, oh, thank you very much, Guatemalan water snake writes, it's 16,699,396,000. Sorry, I missed a zero. 16,699,396,000,000 for 87 straight days. Isn't that funny? Hasn't gone up not a dollar, hasn't gone down a dollar either. That's pretty strict accounting, isn't it? What does this mean, folks? I mean, what does it mean? It means that does it mean that they just don't know the number anymore? They just don't care? Does somebody have the number? I mean, debt is debt, and ruinous debt is ruinous debt, but at least if you're keeping track of the debt, you can play the game for a while, right? I mean, if you have somebody who owes you, let's say they're a vagabond. Let's say it's your idiot son-in-law, for example, who doesn't have a job. He's living in the garage, and he's borrowed $1,000 from you. And then he's borrowed another $5,000, another $6,000. He borrows $8,000 from you, and so on. He keeps promising he's going to pay it back. Then you at least have some indication of what the number is. And if for no other reason, so that you may never expect to see the money again, but at least you know how much he's indebted to you, right? You at least know how much money you've spent that you'll never see again, put it that way. So does that mean that somebody has the real national debt number and just have decided not to report it? How dare they? I just don't understand it. I don't understand it. I cannot understand it anymore. And the main thing I can't understand is why John Boehner is not out there doing whatever that guy did from the Kona thing. Why isn't he out playing with himself in public? Why isn't he out on the steps of the Capitol building with a trench coat, fondling himself? And when the newspaper people come up to it, say, "My God, look at this! What is happening? It's the Speaker of the House of Representatives indecently exposing himself on the steps of the Capitol building." And when all the press come around to ask him about that, he could say, "I'm terribly sorry about all this. I know it's disgusting and rude, but this is the only way I could get a little media attention to say that the government is breaking the law in front of everybody else's face. They've done it for 3 months now, and nobody gives a damn." Is this what we have to do? If I was Speaker of the House, that's what I'd do. I'd do something like that. I'm out of explanation. I just don't know what to do. I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what to say about it. Every day I get more and more and more amazed and astounded and appalled. And, I don't know. Let me say this on this. It's not just Barack Obama personally, and it's not just Henry Reid and Nancy Pelosi. There are Republicans in the Congress. And when I think about the fact that all of those Benghazi survivors who have stories to tell have been given lie detector tests apparently every week, which I've had a discussion about what happens if you have a high-level lie detector test, like the one you get for the CIA or something. It's 8 hours of the most personal information. It's designed to break you. It's waterboarding is what it is. It's psychological torture. All these people are being subjected to these kind of lie detector tests every week. And so the question is, if we have 30, 40 survivors of Benghazi who know what actually happened there, and not one of them will say anything. And if we have all of this stuff, all of this silence, if we have a filmmaker in jail who's been in prison in a dungeon for about a year, and who apparently gives his first interview after being locked up in a dungeon for a year, and the first words out of his mouth apparently are, paraphrasing just a tiny, tiny little bit here, "I sure do love President Obama. It's not his fault. Thank goodness they're protecting me from the other people that want to kill me. I'm very grateful to my government for locking me up for a year." You tell me there's not something going on there. You tell me that would be your first words after you'd been locked up for this. How many other things are there? I mean, all of the stuff at the Department of Justice. So here's what I'm asking, folks. What is it they've got? There's something that's keeping all of these Republican congressmen and senators silent. There's something that's stopping the press. It can't just be ideology anymore. When you get into something this big, it just can't be ideology anymore. There's got to be something that they're using. And I don't know what it is, but I get the feeling that it's something like I mean in the grossest terms, it's almost like FDR says somebody's criticizing the government and FDR pulls him over and says, listen, I know the exact example. It's almost like somebody said this actually happened in the 40s, in the early 40s during the war. Somebody says there's a lot of money missing from the Treasury, a lot of money. And I'm going to find out where it's coming from. I've got a pretty good idea. It's going into Tennessee, and I'm going public with this. And then FDR pulls him over and says, listen, I can't tell you the details, but the money is missing, and it's not accidental, and it's not graft, it's corruption. We are spending it on something that is going to win the war, and I can't tell you what it is, but it's enormously important for the future of this country, and you're just going to have to trust me on this. And then people just kind of bow down and go, okay, all right, if it's that important, if it means the survival of the country, I'll drop it. I don't know what else to say about this other than to say that to keep this many people silent over so many things, there's got to be something like that. It's got to be something that huge. And I don't think it's not noble. There's no way it's noble. It's got to be something like, is it if you go public with this, the economy is going to collapse and the world is going to turn into the road warrior. That was what they basically told George Bush and John McCain, that the angel of death was over the land, and if they didn't release this money for TARP, then the economy was just going to seize. And how many billions of dollars have we added? Trillions, billions. So naive. 7 trillion, 12 trillion. Is that how long ago that was? We don't know anymore because we're not keeping track of the number. So what is it? What is it? And what if it was something that awful? Folks, there's something terrible that's going on, and we've been keeping you from knowing about it, because if we tell you about it, there's going to be a run on the banks, and if there's a run on the banks, then that's the end of the game, and it's all over. What do you do in a case like that? You know, the first thought I had on this was to go back to The Right Stuff, which is based on, actual events in the Mercury program. John Glenn's in orbit, and he's going to go for 7 orbits, and after the first orbit, they get an indication saying his heat shield is loose, that his heat shield is not showing it's secure, and his heat shield may come off. And they say, well, should we tell him? Well, some people say we shouldn't tell him. If we tell him, there's nothing he can do about it. Why worry the guy? And the pilots say, you inform that man about the state of his aircraft. You tell him what's wrong with his aircraft. You've got to tell him he has a right to know. He's an adult human being. He's a citizen. He deserves to know. It's his life. The most logical explanation I can come up with, and logic is a long way behind us now, folks, but the most logical explanation I can think of for this kind of thing continuing is that whenever anybody's ready to stand up and say, well, this is nonsense and this has got to stop. Nobody at the Treasury Department has a problem with this. I understand they're all presidential appointees. Nobody has a problem with this. What's keeping them from saying, hey, why aren't we reporting this debt like we're supposed to? What's holding them in check? And I think it's got to be something like, if you go public with this, the economy's going to just come down. It's just going to collapse. We're working on it. We're trying to fix it as fast as we can. But honestly, if we don't go through this debt ceiling, it's over. And I'm sure that's the story they're being told. But the ultimate cause of this is, if you stop the progressives from spending, they can't buy any more votes. And then their rule on power is over. And if somebody of the other party should ever win another national election and digs into this mess, then it could get bad for them. So I really think, if I had to guess, I have no information more than you do, but if I had to guess, I would say that they are being bludgeoned by national security. Maybe they're being bludgeoned by terrorists. Maybe it is a true fact that can be proven that there are a number of nuclear weapons being secreted in American cities, and if such and such doesn't happen, they're going to go off. Maybe that's true. My response to that would be, do it now and don't do it later. If that's the situation and we have cancer, I want to know about it, and the American people who I serve need to know about it too, because this is their country, not mine. They're adults. They'll take it. Churchill trusted the British people, and they took it. And if we came to the American people and said, this is the state of the bankruptcy that we are in, this is the state of the terrorism situation, this is how bad it is, and it's going to get worse, people would step up. But they don't trust people. They don't have anything. They don't have any respect for people are taxpayers. They are host organisms that provide them with the money to control their lives. And the thing I learn more and more and more about these progressive swine, these animals, these control-freak pigs, these reptiles who simply have to control not only their own lives and their neighbors' lives. The idea that somebody would be away from them, out of their control, is intolerable to them. It's intolerable for a practical reason because those people will do better, but it's also intolerable for them for spiritual and emotional reasons. They must control everyone all the time. They're the most evil, god-awful people that have ever walked this earth, these socialists that have to absolutely control people and treat them like ants. So something obviously is very, very, very wrong when the Treasury Department simply says at the president's behind-the-table request, hey, stop reporting this number because it makes us look bad. And if they do, then what do we have? Is there a government anymore? Is it a republic anymore? Obviously not. Obviously not. We have the nation spying on American citizens. We know this for a fact. We know that police departments are recording license plates, and then they're putting together cases. Oh, that guy's a drug dealer. Let's follow his car electronically. Look at that. Oh, that's definitely a drug deal. Now what we're going to do is, now that we have the probable cause, now we're going to follow him for real, and we're going to set up what they call a parallel track to show actual evidence. Oh, we were just happened to be driving down the street, and he had a blinker out. So we pulled him over, just happened to have a police dog in the back, and the dog hit on the car, and next thing you know, we've got him busted. He's a drug dealer, took him down. So everybody's under surveillance, and everybody knows it. You hear everybody saying now, I can't really talk about this, or maybe I shouldn't mention this on the phone, or maybe I shouldn't put this on Facebook, or I'm a Republican and I don't want to really post that on my Facebook page. Maybe I should register as an independent or a Democrat because I got a business deal I want to get started. I don't want to get audited. It's East Germany. It's not coming. It's not like lunatic, crackpot, right-wing nut job is saying this might happen someday. This is behind us now. This is behind us. This is the stuff that we know about. What don't we know about? What don't... I don't know. 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 But somebody needs to actually stand up. And let me say this about this. The only person who's going to save us now is somebody who has nothing to lose. I speak from some experience here. I'm not married. I don't have property. I don't have lots and lots of things that they can take away from me. I'm starting to gather them, and I'm enjoying them very much. But I don't have anything to lose. They could have video of me doing any number of obscene things that I've probably done, that I certainly have done. They may have shot that off of my iMac, which I thought was turned off, but who knows? I know the little green light is on when I know it's on, but that's a software switch. Somebody could turn that switch on remotely, and I'm sure they do. So what have they got on me? Nothing. Do they catch me cheating on my wife? No, I'm not married. Can they catch me in all kinds of compromising positions? You bet they can, and I'm proud of them too. What have they got? Nothing. I just don't know. I mean, of all the things I've seen in this thing, it's like I just can't believe it's real. Jeremy talks about it as Borg Earth, in that movie, the Star Trek movie, First Contact. There's the parallel Earth, which is run by the Borgs, and it's all completely paved over, and it's all metal. You're living in this parallel universe, but it looks like the same universe, as Jeremy says. The problem is the sky's still blue, so I don't know that I'm not insane. But whoever's going to come up and speak openly to the American people have to have nothing to lose, literally except his life. I don't think they'd imprison that guy. I'd like him to try. I'm not afraid of them. I'm just not. I just don't. I should be, I guess. I'm just not. Of course they're recording me right now, silly weapon. Of course they are. Of course they are. I expect that everything I do is recorded. That's what America's become today. I fully expect that every word I say on my cell phone, in private, anywhere, emails, I don't care. 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 I'm not afraid of them. I'm not afraid of them. They don't scare me. They got nothing on me. They can't ruin my life. My life was ruined before I started this business. That's the one thing I'll say that is the advantage of being a broke loser for half your life, is that if they've got nothing they can take away from me, honestly. So we'll keep swinging. We'll keep swinging. And in another 3 to 4 weeks, I'm going to ask for your help. And those of you that can give it to me, great. And those of you that don't want to because you're worried about downstream effects, I don't blame you one bit, because you guys do have something to lose. So anyway, I'm going to move on because I've got nothing else I can add to this, except that the next one is, in a way, it's not worse. Nothing's worse than this. This is as bad as it gets. But here's the next one, the rodeo clown story. Christopher Cass writes, a rodeo clown would make a better POTUS. Let's choose him next time. I don't know how much of a haiku that is authentically, but it's perfect in terms of this. So let me just talk about the rodeo clown thing for a second here. I hope I have friends in Texas, because I would like to move to Texas, and I may be moving to Texas sooner rather than later, because Texas is still a fundamentally free place. And the reason I say that is because after the God King and his minions, really his minions, the God King doesn't need to do this, that's why I have minions for, put this guy out of business, no more performing for you for the rest of your life because you made fun of the president. You made fun of the president. We can't have that in a rodeo. God knows that never happened before with George Bush. Can't make fun of the president in the parades. Remember all the George Bush heads with the horns and the fangs and the blood running down the face, and George Bush is a monkey and a chimp and scratching his head, and somewhere in Texas a village is missing his idiot. Well, that's different. So this rodeo clown, as you know, probably know, was wearing an Obama mask and probably did some disrespectful things. It's not only allowed in this country, it's expected, it's required in this country. It's what the whole idea of the country is. And now the NAACP is investigating, and maybe we'll get the FBI involved. We'll certainly get the IRS involved. The guy who was the announcer resigned. He's probably getting death threats hither and yon. And the clown, of course, is banned for life. And he apologized. And now, honestly, of all of it, the thing I think that really pisses me off the most is that the guy apologized. He apologized. I'm terribly sorry. I didn't mean to hurt anybody's feelings. You're allowed to hurt people's feelings in this country. You're a rodeo clown. It's your obligation to hurt people's feelings. If you're going to make fun of somebody as a clown, you are obligated to hurt somebody's feelings. That's what this is about. It's what it's about. You are supposed to be able to hurt people's feelings in this country. If you are limited by not hurting anybody's feelings in this country, then you are not able to do anything ever. There's always going to be one person who's going to have a problem. I'm not a Christian, and I don't like this display on the city lawn. City Hall lawn of the nativity scene. I'm a Christian. I find it offensive. It's separation of church and state. It's in the Constitution. Look it up. So therefore, we'll take it down. And once we started bending knee to these lunatics and these complainers and these whiners and these crybabies, once we bended knee to them, then it's just a matter of time. Just a matter of time. The answer to a guy who complains about a nativity scene on the public school, on the City Hall lawn is go pound sand. Go pound sand, okay? This is part of our culture. It's been here forever. It's going to stay. And if you don't like it, too bad. And if you decide to make trouble about it and break some laws, trespassing, or decide to destroy it, we'll guard it with policemen. If you want to put up a Hanukkah display, we'll allow that too. You want to put up a Ramadan display, we'll allow that too. You want to put up no display at all and call that your atheist display, we'll allow that too. But it's staying. And if you don't like it, you can go. You can take a different route home if it offends you that much. You don't have a right not to be offended in this country. And so I'll say two things about this. The reason I mentioned Texas a few moments ago was because I read just recently that after he'd been banned for life, this rodeo clown, and after these people have resigned, and after the rodeo makes the rodeo does its sequence and it gets down in kowtows, and so we're terribly sorry that we could have possibly been mistaken to think that we were casting any disrespect on the President of the United States. We never meant that at all. Never, ever meant it. No, disrespect the President? This President? Never. No, we're terribly sorry. Terribly sorry. Please, terribly sorry that we might have offended dear leader. So, okay. So here's what I think should happen. I think that rodeo clown should start a show, and I think we ought to put up a lot of money for his show, and he ought to go around the country and charge admission to mock Barack Obama hither and yon. And I think if he did that, he'd make a fortune. I would contribute large amounts of money to that guy's campaign. And the thing I like about Texas is I read just before we started the show that one of the Texas representatives, state representative, offered for him to come to Texas and do the show in Texas. That's the only way you fight this stuff. Seriously, honest to God, I think we ought to find a way to raise a lot of money for this guy, and then we ought to put him on the road and charge $15 or $200 or whatever and have him just go around and mock Obama and pay him a fortune just so we can make these swine shut him down or not. Eat it or shut it down. And that money includes private security too, because obviously the guy's going to need it. He's going to need a lot of it. Yep. And just in your face with it. As a matter of fact, when I heard about this, I decided I'm going to do a firewall. I'm going to try and do 12 virtual president segments in one day coming up in about a week. That's why I've been kind of underwater. It's a series called Your Government. And I'm going to shoot 12 of them in a day so that they all look the same and the hair is the same and the lighting's the same. And we're going to put me into the Oval Office. We're going to have a Hollywood professional do it. He assures me you won't know that I'm not in the Oval Office, so that'll be cool. But after that, I might just do a firewall. And I think I might just do a firewall, and I think I might just come out and I'll have the Obama rodeo, the Obama mask in my hand and a cowboy hat in the other, and I'll just stand in front of the white wall, and I'll put the mask on, and then I'll put the hat on, and then I'll go ooga booga, ooga booga, and then I'll take the mask off and the hat off, and I'll throw them on the ground, and I'll just stand there and say, now what are you going to do? What are you going to do now? You know? What are you going to do now? I have to get the wording just right. Give me 1 second. It's nice to be at a computer. I think I'll just throw the mask to the ground, and then I will say, give me 1 second. How hard is this? Honestly, sorry. I just want to get it right, and I have it almost exactly right, but I don't want to get it almost exactly right. I want to get it exactly right. I'll throw the mask to the ground, and I will say, here it is. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, including the worship of an individual. I'll put that in parentheses, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. I will stand there in front of this document and I say, if you don't want me to do this, then tear it up, you miserable low-life reptiles. You control freak animal scum. Tear up the document and then come get me. Here's my address. You know where to find me. I'm going to wear this damn rodeo clown mask for the rest of my life every single day, and I'm going to get up on the roof and I'm going to do it, and you just stop me. Just stop me. They'll find some tax irregularities. They'll find some this or that, and they'll take all that stuff away. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Do it. Do it, because the more clear that example gets, the more people will be let on. And if I ever do get a chance to get on The Daily Show or anything like that, or Colbert, I'll put up with all the mockery and I'll put up with all the snark and all the stuff at my expense, fine. And then I'll just ask them, so it doesn't bother you? It doesn't bother you that the government has not reported the national debt? Because if they were, then it would require the action of the representatives of the people. It doesn't bother you that the executive just told them to stop doing their constitutional duty? Just stop it because it was embarrassing to him and circumvent the will of the people. It doesn't bother you, John? It doesn't bother you, Steve, that a guy who's in your business, the making fun business, was making fun and now he's out of a job for life? You better hope you win every election till the end of time, pal. Because if it's okay to fire this guy for mocking the president, then it's all right to fire you both for mocking George Bush the way you did. Doesn't bother you at all? Have you no standards? None? You have no morals? None? You have no standards? Nothing? No sense? Forget even morals. You have no sense of contradiction? You don't even see the logic problem of it? Obviously not. You're miserable, low-life filth. You're miserable, low-life filth. And you are going to be the reason that large numbers of people are going to get lined up and shot in the back of the head. So when it's your turn, you just remember. You just remember. This one I like because there's not much I can add to what I've just said, but I just like this one very much because it is a great term. I don't know if I've ever heard it before. David Vandervoort says, the lights flicker in Rome. Do they ever? All hail the teflon tyrant. That one belongs in the books, David. If you came up with that line, get it on some Cafe Press merchandise right now. The Teflon Tyrant? Good Lord. That is a phrase, and you're hearing that from a guy who knows how to turn a phrase every now and then. All hail the Teflon Tyrant. Fair enough. Dave Olson says, what happens when cops who have long since lost the left lose the right as well? What a profound question. It's not just the cops, it's also the military, it's also all of our institutions. And once again, Jeremy had a great insight on this. What they're doing is they're using our immune system against us. They know that conservatives love this country. They know the conservative loves the military. They know that the conservatives generally love the police, generally that conservatives are law and order people. They respect Congress. The Constitution anyway. And so they're converting these antibodies. They're converting these immune system defenders into things that generate more viruses, and they're doing it with the police departments. And so it's always been the left. It's always been, F the pigs, and always been the right that's come out and defended policemen. And rightfully so, in my opinion. They have a terribly difficult job, and generally most of them do it in very trying conditions, and nobody knows what that's like. I think you have to be among the worst of the people in the world every single day and deal with them every day to know what it's really like. But this militarization of the police appeals to them in their weak spot. It gets them where they live. It appeals to their pride. It appeals to their ability to think that they're defending the public. It appeals to their sense of self-preservation, which I certainly understand. It appeals to all of the things that they feel good about, and it certainly appeals to whatever sense of authority that they need. Respect my authority type of people. I don't think there's a policeman that doesn't have that. Most of them have it under control. Some of them don't. And so they hear stories about SEAL team operators and Delta team and special forces, and they know the respect that the military gets from our half our country anyway. And they want it because they risk their lives too, and they're entitled to it. They risk their lives too, and often they're a much closer line of defense. And so what happens is, I think what happens is they start to be envious of that worship and adulation. They don't get it, and so they want the trappings of it. So they want the assault rifles, and they want the helmets and the Kevlar and the cargo pants and the webbing and the netting, and they want the armored vehicles, and they want the all that stuff. And so I forget one of these little effects that just went blowing past me in the tornado, but something like the SWAT team is called out in St. Louis, twice a day or something like this, it's obvious. But the most extreme example I've seen was from LAX policemen. Now, I have to tell you, I was a limo driver for 4 years here, and I spent 2-3 hours a day at LAX for 3 years of my life. I got to know the LAX police department rather well. They're horrible people. They have a dirty job to do, and it's not fun to tell people to keep moving. I don't pretend it is. But I have seen their power plays. I've seen their little displays of authority and how much they delight in it. And so I know them pretty well. That's back when they were wearing white shirts with, black pants and had a revolver with a bullet that they keep one bullet in their shirt pocket. And then I was at the airport a couple months ago, and we're pulling in to drop me off for a flight to some speaking engagement, and I saw the guy directing traffic, and he was an LAX policeman, and he was wearing camouflage pants, camouflage cargo pants. He had the big wide webbing belt on there, upon which he had his whistle and his pepper spray or whatever else they give these guys. He had kind of a military cut shirt with a tactical vest on it, and the best part was he was wearing one of those little black hockey helmets that the Delta Force operators wear. Those helmets don't stop bullets. They just keep them from banging their heads against things. They need to be move, and they need to be lightweight, and they need to be able to hear and see. So here's a little LAX policeman who's directing traffic, decked out like a Delta Force guy. Why is he doing that? Because he wants the glory. He wants the glory. He wants to be seen that way. There's an exchange on the web. I couldn't even tell you where I saw it. It was a long time ago. It was about when I bought my AR-15, and I was looking at some of the accessories and stuff. But there's an ongoing sort of a back and forth, either in a comment stream or it was on a message board or it was something like that. But there was this guy they called a mall cop, and I think he was an actual mall cop, and he was talking about all of his gear and his this and that, and he's just gonna, he's got his AR-15 in his trucking, and not in the good way, but just this pomp, just so pumped, so talking about his missions and talking about this and this and this and this and this kind of mall cop self-aggrandizing stuff. And the things, that they'll never understand. I'm not accusing all policemen of this at all, but I am saying it's inherent enough in the culture so that that the police is becoming militarized more and more every day. And the thing that these guys don't understand is that you cannot imitate the genuine article, because the genuine article doesn't talk. I had a chance to meet a guy who's part of SEAL Team 8, and I did a tiny little bit of, I hope you're watching National Security Agency, I did a little bit of weapons training with him in his apartment. He showed me how to balance a dime on the front side of a pistol and make the trigger pull straight. And he talked to me about loading the weapon up here in your workspace and how you get it back into the fight, that kind of thing. Just a guy who's actually a member of the SEAL Squad. And the reason I know he's genuinely a member of the SEAL Squad is, number one, his mechanical motions look like they're titanium rails. Everything he does is done almost like a performer at Cirque du Soleil with that kind of mechanical precision. Watching him work is something that you realize this guy does this 6 hours a day. Little things. He practices loading weapons 6 hours a day. He practices getting the weapon into line. He practices his sight thing. He practices his trigger pulls. He does hours a day. And it's not a bad idea because his life depends on it. The thing that's most remarkable about this guy, by far, was how quiet he was. I've been at large events with him at a table of loud-talking, braggarts like myself, where he'll just sit quietly, and we'll tell our tales of great adventure and all the things that we did out on the range and what remarkable shots we are. And he won't say a word. He won't say a word. He'll just be as quiet as he can be. And he doesn't have to say a word because he knows what he does. And his comrades, the people he cares about, who he respects, know what he does. And his girlfriend knows the basics of what he does. And that's how I know the guy's real. Because he doesn't brag. He doesn't talk. He doesn't comment. He doesn't dissemble. He doesn't do anything other than show me some small tricks, not even tricks, that's the exact word I didn't want to use, some small techniques of the things that he and his friends have learned the hardest way there is to learn things. And this guy is the real deal. And I worship him. I think he's a terrific guy. I worship his character. And of all the people that are out there trying to wear these things, both in the police force and in security guys and all these guys that are trying to get to be something that they're not, is that they'll never capture what he does. In fact, all they'll do is show us that they're the opposite of what he does. Because to do what he does requires the kind of self-confidence to be quiet. And he's got it, and they don't. So, look, back to your question, Dave. What happens when cops who have long since lost the left lose the right as well? They're losing the right. They're losing it. They're not losing it through what they do on the streets, and they're not losing it through pulling me over for speeding or me wanting to put my hands on the car. I get pulled over for speeding. I deserved it. I was speeding. I put my hands on the steering wheel so they can see it because they have a right to know that I'm not going to blow their brains out, at least not without a move. All these things are natural to me. I support them for this. I support them. I give them the benefit of the doubt. In virtually every case, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I wasn't there. I didn't have somebody pointing a gun at me or threatening to kill me. I wasn't surrounded by screaming people. I didn't know how many people were in the next room. I give them the benefit of the doubt all the time for anything that happens in the heat of combat, of action. But what happens in the cold light of day, they're losing me on. And this business about we have to have these cars that we can take pictures of everybody's license plates so we know where everybody is. You're losing me, guys. And we have to have these systems and these things like these even these things like these sobriety checkpoints where we're going to pull over innocent people who've committed no crimes and ask them, have they been drinking? You have no right to ask me that. If you see my car weaving down the road, then you have a right to pull me over, absolutely. But you don't get to just stop me. That's the entire purpose of the Fourth Amendment. Do you have probable cause to think that I've been drinking? No? Then I'd like to go on my way. Am I being arrested? Just answer the question, sir. I'd like to know if I'm being arrested or detained. You have no business stopping me if you do not have probable cause. Do you have probable cause to believe that I've been drinking? And they get very, 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 very angry. And they have no right to get angry. We're the ones who should be angry. You have no right to ask the questions. Change the subject just a little bit. Matt Hindelang writes in haiku-ish form. It may be a perfect haiku. I'm not smart enough to know. A permanent moon base. Is this better than having a mission to Mars? In my opinion, it's 1,000 times better than having a mission to Mars. The whole purpose of what we've seen since the Apollo program, in my opinion, has been that the Apollo program, which in my opinion, July 20th, 1969, until I see otherwise, was the height of human civilization. That doesn't mean it has to be, but so far it has been. So you're going to find somebody, you're going to have to search a long way to find somebody who has a higher opinion of the Apollo program. But the Apollo program, when it was all said and done, was a race to plant a flag someplace, which I'm all in favor of. I think it's grand. The problem is, what do you do after you've planted the flag there? And it seems to me that the effort to go to Mars is so much greater. It's at least a magnitude greater, and it might be 2 orders of magnitude greater than going to the moon. It's at least 10 times more difficult. I bet it's 100 times more difficult to go to Mars, stay on Mars, come back from Mars than it is to do it to the moon. And you want to say, well, if you go to Mars, Mars is a planet. It's like the Earth. But folks, this is the thing that most people don't understand. The atmosphere on Mars is so much closer to the atmosphere of the moon, because the moon does have an atmosphere, you know. It's I don't know what it is, 20,000th of the Earth's atmosphere. It's just trace gases, just barely there. Now, Mars has an atmosphere, about 1% of the Earth's. But people look at Mars and they see the blue sky and they think, man, we could get out and breathe that. No. You're not even close to getting out and breathe it. You're not even close. You're really, being on Mars is the same as being on the moon. So the question is, why go there? All the things, if you go to plant a flag, I'm perfectly happy to plant a flag, but I've done enough flag planting. I've seen it. If I had the money to either go to Mars one time or put a moon base on the moon, I take the moon base on the moon, because if you put a moon base on the moon, then you can use the moon base to build ladders that will get you to Mars routinely. The money spent to go to the moon and stay there means that we could then build in lunar orbit using lunar materials. We could build spacecraft that could transit the solar system. We could. It's like saying. It's kind of like saying, would you rather build? I don't even know where I'm going with this analogy. I was going to say something to the effect of, would you rather make a wagon train to, from New York to St. Louis, or would you rather have Lewis and Clark go all the way to the Pacific and come back? I'd rather have the railroad. I meant to say railroad. I'd rather have the railroad to St. Louis, because that means that everything from there can go to the Pacific in half the distance, or a third, or whatever it is. 2/3. You know what I'm saying, right? Better to build a reasonable step in the direction of everything than to go out there one time, come back and blow the money on that. So I think absolutely I would take the moon base. Absolutely I'd take it. And I'd rather be permanently on the moon than one time on Mars, even if that means losing that to the Chinese, because frankly, if the Chinese go one time to Mars and we're living on the moon, we're going to clean their clocks. Living on the moon means you have a permanent presence in space, and not just on board the space station. You know, of all the things that broke my heart about NASA, this was the one. You're talking to a guy, I've said this 100 times, had the NASA vector tattooed on his heart through his entire childhood, adolescence, 20s, 30s, and into my 40s. I thought the Challenger disaster was a great loss of faith in NASA, not because it blew up. I expect things to blow up. I lost my confidence after Challenger in NASA because they had burn-throughs on the O-rings of the SRBs time and time and time again and gotten away with it. Now, if that had come like a lightning bolt out of the blue, and the first time there'd been a burn-through on the SRBs that had taken out the vehicle, then I would say, good for you, NASA. You know, now you've learned something, fix the problem and go on. But they knew about it and they didn't do anything because they got away with it, because it's not about engineers anymore. It's not about engineers and test pilots. It's about bureaucrats and managers. So, okay. Then we have the Columbia catastrophe. Once again, was it that the orbiter just exploded? No. Did we know this was going to happen? Yes. Because we went to an environmentally friendly foam because we wanted to make the Greens happy, like we have done with everything else. We just went the political correct route, and this foam didn't stick to the external tank the way it's supposed to. So we knew that foam was coming off of the external tank a lot of times prior to the launch of last flight of Columbia. So what happened on the last flight of Columbia? Well, imagine this. A piece of foam came off the tank, it hit the leading edge of the orbiter, and put a hole the size of a, refrigerator, microwave oven, doesn't matter, a big hole in the leading edge of the wing. Now here's where I lose confidence in NASA. If that was the first time, it's the same argument with the SRBs. If that was the first time that foam had ever come off the tank, then you could say, well, this is something we didn't know. It killed the orbiter, killed the crew. We didn't know. Now we know. We're going to fix it. But no, we knew. And so what they did was, after the Challenger was destroyed, somebody had the bright idea, Why don't we fire a piece of foam at the leading edge of the orbiter's wing and see if that might have caused the catastrophe? So remember, we've already known this foam was coming off. They could have shot the foam against the wing before Columbia was disintegrated, but they didn't because they'd gotten away with it. So what did they do? They fire a piece of foam. They reduce the atmospheric drag because it's higher in the air. They fire the piece of foam at the speed at which it was moving at the time, and it puts a gigantic hole in the leading edge of the mock-up of the orbiter's wing. So, no, that's not the NASA I knew. The NASA I knew fixed its problems, and even then, they knew there were problems with Apollo 1. Grissom didn't want to get in that capsule. He thought it was a death trap. He said it was a death trap, and it was. It was his death trap. So, I don't know what to say about this. I understand human nature. I understand better than most. I understand that human nature is human nature. I understand that people are people, that they tend to think of things in the positive way. I get all of this. I do. It's just there's no accountability, and there's no. You know what it is, guys? There's no one playing devil's advocate. If I were to restart a space program, the first thing I would do, and I mean the first thing I would do, is I would take the best engineers we have, I'd take a little cadre of them, and I'd make them a red flag force, and I would basically have these, I would say to them, your job is to think of every single possible way that things can go wrong, not just mechanically, but system-wise, human nature-wise. I want you to constantly watch everything we're doing and figure out how to blow it up. I want you to find every opportunity to have this thing explode, and I want you to deploy it, not for real. I want you to say, what happens if this happened right now? Now, you may find from this that there are certain scenarios that you simply cannot defend against, and I'm perfectly happy to accept them too, but what I'm not happy to accept is that we didn't try. And it's the same thing for the military. We need to be constantly doing all this stuff. We can be testing ourselves all the time, testing ourselves, challenging ourselves. Where are the errors? Where are the gremlins? Where's the next failure going to come from? And when you have evidence of burn-throughs on O-rings and foam coming off a tank, evidence, flight after flight after flight after flight, you don't do anything, it's negligence. It's damn near murder. So the reason I think we have a moon base is because if we have a moon base, then we are living on the moon. I lost my train of thought. I was telling you what the most heartbreaking situation was with NASA. It wasn't Challenger, and it wasn't Columbia. It was much simpler than that. Much simpler, because it was much, much worse. I did an interview at PJTV, probably my first year there, with an actual shuttle astronaut, which I would have fallen down over years ago, but didn't impress me that much this time, to be honest with you. And I talked about the space station, and when the space station was being sold to the American people, we were told that it would be a research outpost in space, and we'll learn all kinds of new drugs and all kinds of new technologies. Terrific. And then they also said, and this was the reason to build it, in my opinion, was that we would use the space station to construct vehicles that could then go to the moon and the planets. They don't have to go into the big nasty gravity well of Earth. They don't have to be tough. They don't have to re-enter the atmosphere. They don't have to carry all the fuel out. They can be spindly, lightweight little things that we can send to the moon and send to the planets, and we'll be building ourselves a fleet. So the purpose of the space station was to be our footprint out the door. This is our train depot that we're going to build so we can have railway lines. This was part of the package. It was the main reason to do it, because frankly, if you don't do that, what do you have the station for? NASA, for the last 25, 30 years, NASA's attitude was, what do you have the station for? Well, we need some place for the shuttle to rendezvous with. Well, what's the shuttle for? It's to supply the space station. Well, what's the space station for? It's a place for the shuttle to go. Well, what's the shuttle for? It's got to go to the space station. Let's wait. Here's what broke my heart. Talking to this guy, I was asking him, I said, hey, when are we going to start seeing these vehicles that are being assembled in space? When will the station be operational enough to start constructing other vehicles? And he said, well, we're not going to do that. I said, well, why not? And the answer is because, if any of you know anything about orbital mechanics, I'll be willing to bet a fair number of you do. In general terms, the Earth's equator, planet Earth is tilted. It's not that the ecliptic is tilted. The planet is tilted. So there's a band that all of the planets, including the Earth, rotate around. It's the plane of the solar system projected onto the sky. It's called the ecliptic. It's inclined 23.5 degrees to the Earth's equator. Better to say, the Earth is tilted 23 degrees to one side, and so the Earth's equator is at an angle to the plane of the solar system. So if you put the space station into a 23-degree inclination, an elliptical inclination, then it is prepared so that you just simply cast the ship off and off it goes. But if you put it in a different angle than that, and the steeper the difference away from that, the harder it is. Now you have to take enough energy to essentially bend the flight path down to the planets or bend it up to the planets, and it becomes essentially useless. And I found out that our space station, which we paid so much money for, was put into a high inclination orbit, which was useless for solar system exploration, because this made it easier for the Russians to get to the station. So it is put into an inclination that the Russians can get to. Why do we have Russians? Because without the Russians, we couldn't have afforded to build the station. Why do we have the station? So that the Russians can go there. See what I'm saying? So we have a space station that's worthless. It's worthless because it's in a useless inclination. You can't change the inclination now. Take too much energy, station and come apart. So it's in a useless inclination, and the reason it's in a useless inclination was so that we could bring the partners aboard to take care of the 10 or 20% of the work and money and lift, or whatever it was. Say it's 50%. Does anybody else not get this connection? In order to finish the station, we had to make it useless. We had to destroy the station in order to save it. This is what happens when large projects are at the whim of large numbers of stupid people like administrators, bureaucrats, and congressmen. I don't think Elon Musk would make that mistake. I'm not saying Elon Musk is perfect by any means, but Elon Musk is an individual. He can be reasoned with. He will respond. It's his money. He's not going to build a space station that's useless because it would offend somebody else if he didn't. So we're going to start the Free Frontier. It's going to be part of the big release. Not the whole Free Frontier, but the means to get it started in about 4 weeks. And we're going to see if we can do it right. I'm going to need a lot of help for that. I'm going to need if I had 10 million Americans, I could do it in 2 years. If I had 1 million Americans, I'd probably do it in 10 years. We got a lot of work to do. But that's coming. Thanks, Dave. You did make me happier. I'm sorry. Matt. That was Matt Hindelang. Moving on, Gilda Vizzini says, classical music. This Bill, who's quite broad-minded, must know its joys too. I do. As I've said before, I think my single great stroke of luck I said stroke of luck. I determined to work at the Miami Planetarium, and I wouldn't go away until they let me. And I worked there for free until they paid me. I didn't ask them to pay me. They just took pity on me, so there was no luck involved. But I did get started at the planetarium under Jack Horkheimer, and who was a musician. I think I talked about this either last week or the week before. But just very, very, very quickly, because he was such a genius in terms of the kind of shows he would use, not only did I get exposed to classical music, that's to be expected in a planetarium, I think, at age 14, but not just classical music, but also things like the music of Lotte Lenya and Kurt Weill from the 1930s in Berlin, classical radio shows, Kate Smith, and The Party's Over. Golly, who sings that? Peggy? Somebody. Just odd, weird stuff. But yeah, a lot of classical music. The first album I bought, you want to talk about your Geek Patrol. First, for my birthday, I must have been 14, I think, I got a pair of Koss Pro 4AA headphones, which were like these, only they weighed about as much as a car transmission. I got a AA14, I want to say, Radio Shack amplifier, which was a kit. And my friends, my big brothers at the planetarium, the electrical engineers, helped me build it. So I built the amplifier. I got a turntable. And the first album I got for Christmas was the Brandenburg Concertos by Johann Sebastian Bach. And Brandenburg Concerto number 5, the Allegro. That was in the planetarium show that I adored called Long Journey of a Young God. And classical music will rewire your brain in the same way that rap will rewire your brain too. Many people, I forget who originally came up with the quote, but they said that Bach is the sound of God thinking. It's really true. The thing about Bach that is so magnificent, in my opinion, is the idea of the fugue, is the idea that little rhythms and passages can be laid out and then they're superimposed in such delicate ways. It's like if row, row, row your boat gently down, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, merrily, row, row. If that kind of a rounder thing is checkers, then Bach is doing that in three-dimensional chess, where all of these little passages and these little themes, these little fugues are being woven together, and then they come back together, and they crescendo, and they match, and they sync, and then they break up again, then they come in out of sync, and then they sync again. It's magnificent. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, I know it's a fairly cliche thing to say, but I don't think there's any question it's the finest piece of music ever written. It's simply, when you hear the chorus come in at the end of that, I dare you not to cry at it. I really do. If you really have it up loud enough so that you really soak it in and you've got some time to think about it, it is the sound of the sky splitting and heaven being open to you and angels coming down and carrying you up into golden clouds. That's what it would sound like. Maybe not as good as that. Not as good as the ninth. But yeah, and by the way, just a quick aside, I see in my YouTube, my Ustream comments, which lagged this by about 20, 30 seconds, that somebody said, Brent Cates said that you can see Jack Horkheimer on YouTube. You can. Look up Star Hustler on YouTube. He did a show called Star Hustler. Now, that was Jack at his worst. Star Hustler was a character that he played, and it was kind of a mincy sort of a character. Jack could be that mincy, but he was much more serious than that. I look over there and I see Ironked mentions The Planets by Holtz. Remarkable. Everybody knows Mars, but Mercury is beautiful, Jupiter is beautiful. All of them, Uranus, are fantastic. It's really, really nice. I'm a huge, 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 huge fan of Claude Debussy. Clair de Lune is just, I don't know what you do with Clair de Lune. And also Reverie is a magnificent piece of music. It just, every time first time I heard Reverie, I was reminded of the time I was at Lake Tahoe, and it was a giant ski chalet that we'd rented, that a friend of mine had rented, because I couldn't rent anything at the time. I was invited up there. And the moon was coming up over the lake, and there was nothing but snow everywhere. And and Reverie is just looking out over the snow over the lake is really, really something. So I love Debussy. Let's see, what else have I got? I'm very fond of, what is that? Oh my goodness. I'm not going to look it up I'm not going to take the time to look it up on my iPhone. Is it Minuet? And all, and Pachelbel and Pavane for a Dead Princess and all these things. I really like tone kind of things. And by the way, speaking of classical music, I think John Williams would have been right at home with some of these classic composers. I often listen to theme from Raiders or especially from Superman, and I like to think, what would Beethoven have thought of this? What would Mozart have thought of this? And Mozart, of course, goes without saying. I think they would have been impressed. I really do. I really think it's that good. So all the stuff, it's amazing, and nobody under the age of 30 listens to this at all, ever. I've never met a young person who's ever listened to the first note of classical music. It's a sad thing, too, because classical music, if you're forced to listen to it, as I was, and when I say forced, I mean by choice, it really does calm you, and it enlightens you, and it keeps you sane. And the fact that music's been there for 400 or 500 years and continues and will continue, presumably, even past this economic collapse that's being foisted on us as we speak, I think it's nice to know that that'll be there. It's always been there. It'll be there for a long time. It's humanity at its best. And by the way, of all the things you've ever seen, you take a look at a Bach score and compare it to the score for a rap tune. You want to talk about why we're conservative, why we believe the world is running down. That's all the evidence you need. And besides, you don't need to go back to Bach. Just look at the work of a composer I like very, very, very much, Scott Joplin. And compare that to modern music or Thelonious Monk. I'm not a jazz guy. I've tried, but I just don't. I guess I'm too structured. I just don't much like jazz as a general rule. Although I have Take 5 and Baby Elephant Walk and oh my goodness, and what's the one that Austin Powers appropriated from Quincy? Anyway. So, it's great. It's great. And I would really get people to listen to it. I'd make them listen to it. I don't want to make anybody do anything, but if I had an academy, I would have people listen to classical music, and I'd make them sit through the lesson. Yeah, the Superman theme from John Williams is about as good as it gets. It's really great. Kevin wants to switched on Bach. By the way, it just brought up a memory. There have been a couple of, Wendy Carlos and Walter Carlos. But there's an album out there. I'll be absolutely astonished if anyone has ever heard this album. Although with this crowd, you never know. You always get a pleasant surprise. One of the themes that we used in the Long Journey of a Young God show was a classical music rendition done electronically, and it was called "Stolen Jewels" by a guy named Dr. Tellany. And "Stolen Jewels" took Jesus, Joy of Man's Desiring, and he renamed it Superjoy, and it really instrumented it and put in electric guitars and stuff. And "Stolen Jewels" is the coolest album I think I've ever heard. It's not super electronic. It's not kind of like early Moog kind of thing. It's just really, 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 fun. "Stolen Jewels" by Dr. Tellany. If anybody could get a digital copy of that, I'd pay them real money for it. I really would. I'd love to have that album again. I've looked for it online. It's very, very obscure. I think you might be able to buy the vinyl, but I don't have the turntable anymore, and I don't have the ability to conform it. But if somebody can get it, I will pay them. I'll pay them real money for it. For "Stolen Jewels" by Dr. Tellany. Very obscure, but very, very cool. All right, moving on. And thanks for that, Gilda. That was an interesting offbeat question. I like this one because I can answer this in a sentence. Patrice Franklin says, "What say you to the Bush W vacays versus Obama's vacays? There are fewer of the one than there are of the other." Brandon Thomas says, "Land of statelessness, tax-free and voluntary. Would you advocate?" This sounds to me like the libertarian ideal. And here's what I have to think about the libertarian ideal. And now all the libertarians are getting on me. Every time I say anything about libertarians, I always get something wrong. With that said, I think that there are certain people who could live in a land of statelessness. I think many of us could probably live in a land that was pretty near statelessness. But the problem is that that's not a large number of people. And it's even the ones who could live in a land of statelessness, I don't think we could live there all the time. I think they're flawed. I think people are flawed. I think people will do things that will benefit them over other people. We understand the whole idea of objectivism is great. But they will trespass. They will infringe. And to say that they won't is, in my opinion, misguided. There's no evidence that anyone ever lived that way. So I am skeptical of a stateless state. I think that tax-free and voluntary could certainly work if you had people who were, and would be magnificent. I don't want to be misunderstood about this. I think it would be magnificent. I would love to live there. But then the question becomes, if it's a stateless state, where do you live? If it's a stateless state, how do you keep people who don't like the idea of a stateless state away? If you have a stateless state, let's say, did I say stolen goods? I'm sorry, I was looking at comments. Stolen jewels, stolen goods. It's so nice to have a peanut gallery that's 30, 40 seconds or a minute, two behind me, and I always kind of back up like that sometimes. Sorry about that, especially you YouTube people. But the problem with the stateless state is, what if somebody wants to come into the stateless state and start killing people? What do you do about that? If you're saying a stateless state means either a private police force or groups of citizens who are voluntarily part of a militia or something, okay. But what laws are being broken if it's a stateless state? Do you have laws against burglary and murder and rape? Presumably you do. What are the statutes and where do they live? Where do we know about these things? Do we protect ourselves against people coming in who don't believe in a stateless state? Whole history of our species is that predators will always come into the prosperous and the hardworking and steal from them. What do you do about that? How do you defend them? How do you tell what is rightful defense of this property versus unrightful defense of the property? Do you get to shoot somebody from your porch in a stateless state because they crossed your property? Do you get to shoot them because they look at you funny? I don't know if I can. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to imagine what it looks like in a world where it works. But I've never really bought it. The reason I would say I'm a conservative and not a libertarian is I've seen enough of human nature, both through history and in person, to know that anything that looks like utopia is probably not going to be feasible. And a stateless state is the kind of utopia that appeals to people like us who are hard workers, who want to be left alone, who are able to take care of ourselves, and who want to voluntarily associate with other people and voluntarily trade. The people who get it, the John Galt thing. But Galt's Gulch is in itself a form of utopianism, because while you may have all of these awesome producers there, and you don't have to convince me about how amazing that would be. Ultimately, if you got Hank Reardon there, and Reardon goes to Galt's Gulch and wants to make Reardon metal and buys everything in gold, that's swell. But somebody has to work in that factory. Now, maybe you could get people to come in as partners. That would be great. Maybe you'll pay them shares and everything's fantastic. Sooner or later, it's going to get big enough. And then the question is, what are the rules? I mean, to me, a stateless state means no rules. Maybe I don't understand it, but I don't. Land of statelessness, tax-free and voluntary, sounds great. What are the rules? You have to have some rules. Where does your property begin? Where does the other guy's property begin? You can say that two people agree that this is where they begin. Where do they write it down? What if somebody disagrees? What if somebody has a problem with it? What if somebody thought, no, when we said the river, I meant your bank of the river. I mean my bank of the river. No. Who settles this? I don't know. I find it's the kind of idea that sounds great and is very appealing, but just doesn't seem to be able to hold water. What I think the answer is, to be honest with you, Brandon, is not a stateless state. It is the minimum state. There you've got me 100%. There, where debates constantly would be, how can we make this smaller? What is the minimum that we can get away with? Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be great if you had a Congress that basically said, what laws can we eliminate? What can we get rid of and still keep order and prosperity? What can we do? Let's have a discussion about whether or not we can eliminate this law or this regulation. That's, I think, the way to go. Not a stateless state so much as people dedicated to the idea of a state as small as possible. We managed to get by on that idea for well over